Hi, my name's Jane Scarf, and I'm coming to you from Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And I have some discussion that I want to do with you about a recent fear that the government is going to bring out the military to help Ford violate our rights, basically, to help whatever ID us on the street and ask us where we're going, shutting our businesses down, shutting our homes down, all the other things that these emergency measures were suggesting that the police had the right to do. And we're very lucky that in this province, the police, the regional police at least, not the OPP, but the regional police and the RCMP are not enacting any of this extraordinary police power that Ford is trying to give them. They're holding back and they're refusing to violate people's rights. So a few days ago, there was this panic that Ford had said he's going to ask the Prime Minister to bring in the Emergency Act and override your rights. So I'm here to tell you that it was just complete malarkey, because the Emergency Act, in the preamble, I'm going to read it to you. In the preamble of the Emergency Act, it says, the Governor and Council, in taking such special temporary measures in their emergency planning, would be subject to Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the Canadian Bill of Rights, and must have regard to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, particularly with respect to those fundamental rights that are not to be limited or abridged even in a national emergency. So what would be the legal provision for the federal government to bring in the military to help Ford override our rights? It says right there that they can't do that with the emergency measures. In fact, the federal emergency measures are much better than the provincial ones, because the provincial ones do at least sound like they're capable of overriding your rights in a case of an emergency, which they're attempting to do. But they're not getting very far because the police are refusing. They're giving their stupid tickets out, and there's plenty of grounds to fight those tickets. But they're refusing to smash into your house, smash into your church, smash into your business. They're by law are giving tickets, public health are giving tickets, police are handing tickets out, bylaw tickets, but like they're not even breaking up the protests or even trying to break them up. They're just handing them tickets in some cases. In some cases, they're not even ticketing them. Depends on what region it is. So this is not a real thing to be afraid of. This is a psyop. It was meant to make us think, oh my God, the military are coming. And, of course, the sense is, how could we resist that? We don't have the capacity to withstand that kind of attack. But that's not what our military's for. It's not to attack us and override our rights. They're there to defend this country from invasion from other countries. That's their primary purpose. Now, we've allowed them to also come in cases of emergency, but not to override rights, to help out. They can help out in the ice storm, for example, or tornadoes, things like that, where there's not enough local manpower to handle the emergency. So what? So if they bring out the Emergency Act federal, it doesn't mean that they're going to come in and override your rights. The police and the military and the bylaw officers, as a matter of fact, are all obligated under the Canadian Bill of Rights. So none of those agencies can legally override your rights for any reason, no matter, even if it was a real disease that was threatening us, they still would have to seek our voluntary cooperation, which we would cooperate with, if it was a real pandemic and like the measures they were asking for actually made a difference. Unlike masks, unlike locking down healthy people with no symptoms, like no wonder they had to, make bylaws where it's being enforced, because nobody would or very few people would voluntarily do stupid things that have no scientific basis to work. We have still protocols to deal with communicable disease that are all voluntary. And guess what? They worked. Canada has eradicated many different outbreaks of all kinds of communicable diseases that are spread in any different way. They do that with voluntary contact tracing, which people do comply with. And if there is a serious disease and somebody won't take measures to make sure it doesn't spread, there was the criminal code to deal with that and court orders. There was no need to be forcing everybody to shut their business and wear a mask and all that, because there's no evidence that is going to work. Even the World Health Organization said lockdowns don't work. They're just making poor people more poor. And you know the whole mask story by now. If you don't have cotton batting in your ears, and for those that do have it in their ears, I think they should take it out, put it in their mouth, and listen to the science, listen to the doctors, listen to the virologists telling you masks don't protect anybody from virus. The virus molecule is too small. The mask won't capture it. Those masks in surgery are not anything to do with virus. It's to do with spit accidentally, coming onto the patient when they're open in surgery. It's not about the virus spread. Anyways, and even on the box of those blue ones, those surgical ones, it says it doesn't protect you from the spread of COVID-19. So all nonsense. Military are coming to force you to give your ID on the road, contrary to our rights. The only time the police have a right to stop you on the street is if they have reasonable and probable grounds to believe that you personally committed a crime. So somebody matching your description or some other tangible reason for suspecting you of a crime. Then they can ask you for your ID, and only then. And at your door, they have to have a warrant. They cannot come in your church or your business or your house without a criminal warrant. And a bylaw, whatever, decision from a bylaw officer or whatever is not sufficient grounds to smash in and shut down. They can issue orders, shut down orders, which I think they're completely challengeable, but that's going to remain to be seen. Like, see what the court does with it. But even that doesn't give them the right to smash in and close you down. They can give you fines and then do collections or whatever on fines or whatever that way. But they cannot use force to shut you down based on a bylaw. And I'm very concerned that a prominent constitutional lawyer made a video a few days ago stating that we had to worry that the military was going to be brought in. And he gave as his evidence that this was going to happen, he cited the leaked Liberal document about COVID-19, where they're predicting restrictions and rolling back our rights and blah, 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 and quarantine centers and yada, yada, yada. Well, they made a sort of a show of bringing in these measures, but nothing stuck because the police won't use force. So quarantine, that was like a ticket you're going to get if you don't go in their quarantine center. If you don't take a PCR test, ticket. And those tickets are challengeable because those are medical treatment, and you have a right to refuse medical treatment. If they know you have a disease, then they can deal with it. They can stop you from mingling with the public or whatever until the risk is gone. But just as some preventative thing, like every single person is going to have a PCR test, which is a medical procedure, wear a mask, which is a medical procedure, quarantine, which includes lockdown, that's part of their quarantine thing, or else these quarantine centers. So all of that is illegal, and people are finding that out now, thank God, and they're refusing. And even, I thought it was marvelous that the mothers, rose up about the parks being closed. There were no flippin' flying way are our kids going to be denied in like no school and no park? Not happening. They're going to smash those fences down and cut the tape. And Ford came out. Okay. Parks are open. And then we have this so-called high-end lockdown, even cutting off product out of Walmart. But yet golfing was no problem. And then people were, what? Okay. Golf is closed. So it's ridiculous. And we've even had an apology from Ford saying, oops, I guess I went too far. Okay, so like that's the opposite of what this prominent so-called high-end constitutional lawyer is telling you. And the first thing that a legal representative who's issuing a legal opinion needs to do is look at the law that relates to what he's saying. So he would need to look up what is the criteria for the Emergency Act, and is there any provision there for them to use the military against the citizens? And the answer to that is no. Look it up yourself. The Emergency Act, 1988, preamble. I read it earlier. So, furthermore, there is something else that he neglected to mention, and that is, just a second, I have to look it up here. That is a case law, Regulation 58-16, pursuant to Police Services Act, does not arbitrarily allow the police to collect information. So this business of, stopping you at the side of the street, demanding your ID and where you're going in order to fulfill this emergency measures for COVID, not the case, because the Supreme Court decided if threatened with arrest for not identifying yourself, 1993 Supreme Court case, Regina versus Schramma, police can't use the provisions of the Criminal Code in enforcing a provincial bylaws or provincial regulations. So this idea that, the police in Ontario are not doing it, so we're going to call out the military to do it. Military have the same constraint in terms of respecting the rights of citizens. And again, we should be looking at protecting our rights with the Canadian Bill of Rights. And if you're in Alberta, you have a double whammy because you have the Alberta Bill of Rights. So you have Alberta Bill of Rights plus the Canadian Bill of Rights. So if anybody is telling you, oh my God, the military are coming, relax. Because if they're coming, they're not coming to override your rights. They may. The worst thing they could possibly be allowed to do is assist in the vaccinating people. Now, I would adamantly disagree with that, but nevertheless, it's something that they would be allowed to do as long as they're not using force. They're not, forcing entry or forcing you to stop on the side of the road or anything. Just like a voluntary, and they can't even enter your property if you put up no trespass and include military. No military, no police, no bylaw, no public health, no trespass. So they can't even come to your door with the damn vaccine. And that's the worst. And they can escort people to quarantine centers if the person wants to go, stuff like that. And if we have problem with the food chain, they can bring food to people. If we have other kinds of disasters or other kinds of crises related to all this, they can be called in to help, but they can't be called in to stamp your rights. There is nothing in Canada, federal legislation, that allows any override of our rights, period, end of conversation, except for Section 1 of the Charter. But luckily, we have the Canadian Bill of Rights that stops that at right in its tracks. Bill of Rights says no override. That's the end of it. And it's constitutionally binding, and it's very solid legislation. No loopholes like the Charter. So if you are confronted with any situations where your rights are being violated or there's an attempt to violate your rights, you can quote your right to the rights contained in the Canadian Canadian Bill of Rights. And the one you want to in particular look at is the Section 1, which is life, liberty, and security of person, and the enjoyment of property, and not to be deprived thereof except by due process of law. Very strong right, has a history, it has common law history. It includes your right to express informed consent for medical treatment. Very strong, well-established common law right. So that takes care of vaccine, PCR, masks, and quarantine, which includes lockdown. So basically everything that's being thrust on us by these provincial bylaws. They're not even legislation. Didn't even go through the provincial legislature. So it certainly can't override federal legislation that says right in it that the only time your rights can be violated by police, bylaw, or, well, it doesn't say who, it just says any matters, anything that comes under the federal government, which includes police, bylaw, and the mayors. They can't override your rights. Police cannot, bylaw, municipal bylaw, and the mayors can't. So that's pretty good protection. And it's the mayors that are bringing all this in, by the way. It's provincial regulation, and it's being enforced by the mayors. So I'm recommending that people sue the mayor for breach of duty, for violating the Canadian Bill of Rights, particularly Section 1, when Section 2 says, under no circumstances except through an act of federal parliament that expressly says that they're going to override your rights. And there's no such even bill on the table, never mind passed, signed, and sealed. So we're good to go. We have rights in this country. The Canadian Bill of Rights was enacted in 1960, and it was promoted at the time as a document that was necessary to keep communism out of Canada. And guess what? So it is, because police, and I expect military, because we don't see any sign of forcing anything from the military. So the police, at least the regional police and the military, appear to be respecting those fundamental absolute rights in our Canadian Bill of Rights. So if anybody has any questions, you can email me at mjslegalservices@yahoo.com. And in the meantime, relax. We got this.